Hi, everybody. Lovely people. Thank you for coming out tonight. Welcome to our home station, WNYC. Welcome to our home turf at the Greene Space here. My name is Soren Wheeler. I'm the editor, the executive editor up at Radiolab. If you happen to be an attentive listener, you might have heard me from time to time on the show. But more often than not, my job is to be behind the scenes, sort of thorn in the side of the people that you actually want to hear. But tonight we have something very special. Tonight, we are doing a live taping of a thing that we've been playing around with lately. It's a series of episodes that we're calling Viscera, in which our very own ER doctor and intrepid reporter Avir Mitra brings us gripping visceral tales of surprising or exciting or worrying or just straight up strange things that are happening inside our own bodies. And because tonight is a live taping, we will be keeping it loose. There are things that we do that may or may not show up on the podcast, on the radio. We will have some audience interaction. We will have some live guests who can come up and say whatever they want, free of the tyranny of my editing. And I think it's going to be an awful lot of fun. Now, the thing that Avir is here to talk about tonight is something that I think many of us know about, have thought about. Some of us have probably worried about it in the back of our brain, perhaps. But Avir has been on the front lines of this, both as a doctor and a reporter, for a while now. And knowing Avir, I am confident that at the end of tonight, we will all see and feel this differently than we have before. And if we're lucky, maybe in a newly hopeful way. So, help me welcome out Dr. Avir Mitra.
Hey.
Hey.
Thank you guys. Wow, a lot of people, I love that.
You
So
ready?
my childhood dream of wearing a Britney Spears mic is coming true right now.
Oops, you did it again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do have a lot on my mind today, so I'm excited to get
I got to say that every story you've ever brought me, I feel like starts at your job. Like somebody walks through your doors at the ER with some, I don't know, injury or disease or what have you.
Yes, that is what today's kind of about, but I don't know, as I was thinking about it, I kind of realized it goes back even further than that. It goes back to 2006, this thing that happened with my dad, actually.
Oh, your dad is a doctor, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a doctor, my mom's a doctor, my grandmom's a doctor. But at the time, I didn't want to be a doctor. I just wanted to be like a rock star. That was my dream.
You went to med school, then you decided you don't want to be in med school, you want to be a musician. And being an old practical man as I am, I knew that's not going to work. I told you 1,000 times that the difference between a large pizza and a musician, which pizza, large pizza feeds a family.
Yeah.
Bold to let this room laugh at you like that. Like us.
That's why I go to therapy. It's
fair
fun.
share.
But the point is, like at this time in my life, I was going every day to band practice, hanging out with my buddies, staying up till 5 in the morning. Meanwhile, my dad is waking up early. He's going to work at a hospital. And he was seeing this sort of interesting change take place.
We have been seeing infected hand infection patients, coming all the time to us with various reasons. It could be a small scratch, it could be a pin puncture, and we were treating them basically with a 48 hours worth of antibiotic, IV antibiotic or PO antibiotic, and it used to get resolved easily. And then suddenly we started to see these patients who were not really getting better within that short period of time. So we said, that doesn't make any sense. Why is it so that we're seeing so many patients? And we started doing some culture for each and every patient who came into the emergency room on a routine basis.
So he's doing this at work, and he sort of comes up with this idea like, let's do a research project about this. Let's see what's going on. So, he turns to me because, English isn't his first language. He doesn't know how to use a computer. I'm a pretty smart kid. So he's like, hey, why don't I get you to help me write this paper? So I say, yeah.
You are the only person who has absolutely nothing going on at that stage with the music, etc. Instead of sitting idle, I thought if I keep you busy doing some medical papers, later on, if you ever plan to reapply, these papers might help the guys who are looking at your application saying, he's not a complete derelict.
Well, I wasn't sitting idle because I was doing
Well,
music at
it's
that
a
time.
derelict in the sense you're doing music.
Yeah.
I do feel like I should step in and let you all know that there's Avir was a little bit of a legit rock star. I mean, you had a record, you were on Conan O'Brien.
That's true. That's true. But
All
this
right.
this was later, right? At the time, I was broke. I was living in the basement. It was not a good look. I get it, you know. But anyway, back to the topic. You know, what we found in this paper is that these patients were coming in with infections. The bacteria was MRSA.
Oh, sure. Like I feel like MRSA is like the late 90s news super hospital bug.
Yeah, MRSA was like a typical bacteria that had become resistant. And it was a thing that had already existed, but it was the type of bug, the type of infection you could get, like if you were super sick, you know, you're like in the hospital for months and you're getting all these meds, like you might get MRSA. But what this paper found is that people were coming in off the street who had like never been in a hospital. Kid falls off a skateboard, cut. He's got MRSA. How? So what we found is that actually this bacteria that lived in one place had sort of like escaped.
It doesn't stay limited to that patient or that limited to that facility. It essentially escapes, and then it becomes a risk factor for the general population.
You know, I had that experience. I wrote up this paper, and I didn't think much of it because I was like, whatever, I'm in a band. But eventually, you know, I go to med school. Now 10 years go by, and now I'm actually showing up in the ER as a resident. And at this point, you know, MRSA is just like a common thing. Like it's like typical, you know, 100 people, you know, probably 3 or 4 of you have MRSA here. It's like just a thing that people have.
You know, my family has MRSA. We as a family.
It's like
it's
a
somewhere
tradition
in the
family.
We don't talk about who exactly it came from, but it's somewhere in the house.
Like every Christmas.
Yeah, when my
you
second kid was
share
born, they had to
MRSA.
like actually do a bunch of stuff with the delivery room where they put like plastic over and they had yellow tape and yeah.
It's on brand for you, Soren. I
Yeah,
can see it.
it's-
Yeah. So yeah, that's how it is. MRSA is a common thing, but I wasn't worried about it because we had a drug called vancomycin, which can treat MRSA, so it's not like incurable. So now I'm working in the ER, a year goes by, and then it's weird. All of a sudden I start seeing patients who have resistance to vancomycin. So now the vancomycin isn't working. It's like, okay, so at least we have a class of antibiotics called carbapenems, a little bit more rare, but I can use those drugs for those patients.
So you have a backup.
Yeah, I have that backup. I can use it. But then another year goes by, and then I'm starting to see patients that are resistant to the carbapenems. But that's not working anymore. And so then at that point, I have to go to this drug colistin, which is like just this crazy old drug that like I don't even want to use. Yeah, it's like it's got a bunch of side effects, and basically I feel like I'm being backed into a corner all of a sudden, which is this simple infection, and now it's like I have to do all this stuff and I have no choice.
I gotta say, like as we've been talking about this, like obviously I've known about antibiotic resistance, and I'm sure many of us here have. But like, how long have you been a doctor? 10 years.
10 years.
It's
yeah.
like I'm not that that's not a lot, but it's not a lot.
Yeah.
And I feel like you've in that short time, you have been sitting there literally watching drugs that you could use slip away. I mean, it's sort of like the pace of it. Like while we've all been distracted by presidential politics or maybe a pandemic, like this has been happening right in front of your eyes.
Yeah. No, it honestly is terrifying to like go up to work and see this happen. I don't know, it's just scary because it's like if we don't have antibiotics, like we're not really doctors. Like so much of what people have are infections. We use them. But beyond that, like you can't get a surgery if you don't have antibiotics. You can't get a C-section. Like you're basically useless without these drugs, you know? And that's why I kind of start to have these nightmares where it's like, am I just everything I know about medicine? Is it just this like little bubble that we're living in?
What do you mean by like little bubble?
What I mean is like, okay, let's zoom way, way out. All right, for hundreds of thousands of years, we've been human beings and we've been fighting bacteria. But for like most of that time, we have been losing. Like just think about it. Like back in the day, you get a little simple UTI, like you die. You have sex with the wrong person, you get disfigured for life. You catch a little cold, turns into pneumonia. I mean, basically you gotta move somewhere like Arizona, try your best, or you probably just die. Like that is the way the world has always been until not that long ago, like less than 100 years ago. This guy, Alexander Fleming, he basically just observed that fungi were producing a chemical that was killing bacteria. So he basically just isolated that chemical and called it antibiotics.
So that's penicillin, right?
That's penicillin. And like everything we've done since then has been a variation on that theme. We tweak it a little bit here, find a different fungus there, but it's the same idea. And it's basically this idea that has allowed like civilization as I guess we all know it to exist. Like that's how we've won wars. That's how we live in a city. That's how we're all in this room together and like people aren't dying, you know? Everything we do is just based on kind of this idea.
And that is the bubble that you feel like is bursting?
That's the like 100-year bubble that, I don't know, sometimes it feels like it's bursting.
I mean, does that mean that you actually feel like, what are we looking at in the 5-10 years, that there are bugs out there that no drug works on?
Well, maybe I can like share a story.
Yeah.
All right.
As your editor, I recommend you do.
I know. Can't just be me blathering.
Let's
here.
move.
All right. So this is Steffanie Strathdee.
Yeah.
She's an infectious disease epidemiologist at the University of California, San Diego. But here, she's just going on vacation with her husband, Tom, to Egypt.
We ended up going at a time when there had been a terrorist attack in Sharm el-Sheikh a couple of weeks prior. So all of the people from the West had canceled, and we were the only one on this cruise ship. So it was really kind of a ghostly experience. I remember standing at the front of the boat doing one of those Titanic things, like, woo! And then we had this lovely seafood tower for dinner, and we're looking at the stars. It was really romantic. And then all of a sudden, Tom started to turn a bit green, and he was losing his stomach contents all night. So I called a doctor to the ship, and the doctor first gave him an intravenous antibiotic and some fluids and said, oh, he'll be right as rain by dinner. And he wasn't. He was worse.
So they get off the ship at this point. They go to a clinic in Egypt where they're trying some other medicines. It's not working. So they actually ship him to a bigger hospital in Germany.
Well, he was in an ICU in Frankfurt, where they have some of the best gastroenterologists in the world. But when the culture came back, the doctor said, I've got some terrible news. This is the worst bacteria on the planet. It's Acinetobacter baumannii. And I went, what? And when he said it again, I realized, wait a second. This was an organism that I used to plate on my Petri dishes back at the University of Toronto when I was a student in the 1980s. And all we needed was the lab-coated gloves back then. How can this be the worst bacteria on the planet?
So despite all this treatment, he's getting all these antibiotics. He is getting worse and worse. At this point, he's on a breathing machine. He's getting sicker. So they package him up and send him back home to the University of California, San Diego, the ICU there.
I have a chart of all the different antibiotics that it was resistant to right off the top, and I call those the Penicillins, that are the heavy-duty antibiotics that have to be infused into the patient and that have a lot of toxic side effects. He was on all of those in a cocktail, but there was no other alternative. In fact, we didn't even know if these antibiotics were going to do anything. When I pointed to a whole bunch of them on the wall, and the doctor said, there's nothing that will kill this thing. I said, well, then why are we treating him with all of these antibiotics? And they said, because we don't know what else to do.
This is probably a dumb question, but emotionally, what are you going through at this time?
Well, I felt like it was God's cruel joke that here I am, an infectious disease epidemiologist, and I had no idea that antimicrobial resistance had gotten this bad over the last few decades, that an organism, a wimpy bacteria, as one of the doctors called it, that has acquired these superpowers and is now like killing my husband. Like, what? Like, how can this be? How can an infection that you acquire on vacation to a guy who's, so healthy that he was crawling backwards down into a pyramid one day, and then 2 days later he's fighting for his life? Like, this just doesn't happen, does it?
I mean, it's crazy just to think about what she said, that this was a bacteria that she was plating with just gloves, and then it's become this thing that we can do nothing about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's scary, man. I mean, look, and this was 10 years ago that this happened. So I'm showing up to work and I'm seeing cases like this where no antibiotic works. I got to mix and mingle different antibiotics to try our best. And I don't know. It's just a scary feeling because I feel like I'm watching a world war that's happening basically right under our noses, and we're not really paying attention to it. And then somehow, like, I'm at the front lines of this, and I'm like, how did this happen to me? Like, why am I here? I don't know. So that's what's been on my mind, and I guess that's why I wanted to come here and talk today, because I wanted to sort of zoom out and take a big picture of, like, okay, there's this global war. Like, what is really going on here?
Well, so now that we've got you, it's sort of like a little bit out of doctor mode and into maybe reporter or investigative looker mode. Like, back me up a little bit, because you talk about it as a world war.
Yeah.
Like, give me the layout of, unpack that metaphor for me a bit. Like, what's the battlefield? Who are the combatants?
Okay.
Walk me up to it.
Yeah, so we could start with sort of who is this battle between, right? Because you got us and humans. And on the one side...
Or us and bacteria.
Us and bacteria, yes. So I forgot I was human. I'm one of the lizard people.
It is going to get confusing later on which is which, but that's okay.
Yeah. But us, team us, I promise I'm human. We're on this side. Think about what we have, right? Like, we're composed of trillions of cells. We have, like, huge brains. We have all these muscles. We have fancy degrees. We have ChatGPT. We have everything. And on the other side, we have bacteria that are like single-celled organisms. They don't go to school. They don't know how to read. They don't have brains. They don't even have a single neuron. They don't have any muscles. Like, they, just put them in the air and they'll probably just die.
Most of them with a spray of Clorox and they're done.
Exactly.
Yeah, I gotta say, it raises a question, which is sort of like, how in the hell are we losing?
No, I know. That's exactly what I think about. It's like, how are we losing this war? And yet I'm sitting at work and watching us lose it, and that's where I get to thinking. And I don't know, I've grown to have a respect for these guys, because I'm like, I actually fundamentally think that they're, like, better than us. I really do.
In what, like?
I mean, sure, we have all this stuff, but they can actually just evolve better than we can at a very fundamental level.
Well, explain how something can evolve. Like, because they got, like, they've faster lifespan, they mutate easier. Like, how do you evolve better?
Yes, that's true, but there's this other sort of trick that they have. I could describe it, but I'd rather kind of just show you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Can I show you guys? Can we do that? All right, but you guys have to be involved. All right, there's some crowd participation. All right, I'm going to set up a hypothetical scenario here where we're going to watch evolution happen. Let's pretend you guys are all humans. You guys are humans, right? We'll assume everyone here is a human. And me, Dr. Mitra, I'm going to try to kill everyone in this room. The way I'm doing it is
This is, by the way, not a typical public radio
Right.
tactic.
Right. It's an aggressive donation request,
Right. Or else.
Yeah.
No. Okay, all right. How are you going to do it?
The only way out is if you donate. No, I'm going to seal all the windows, everything, and just suck all the oxygen out of the room. So you all are going to suffocate to death. I'm sorry. I know some of you guys. I apologize. And I need a volunteer. I need one volunteer, ideally a single person. Is there a single person in the audience somewhere? Okay, all right, you're single. Okay, all right. What's your name? Danielle. Okay, Danielle. Can I ask some personal questions? I don't want to get too personal.
Yes.
All right. Are you dating or? You're dating. Okay. Are you in the apps or you're just in person? No apps. You gotta just like. Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna set up this scenario. Danielle, thank you for volunteering. So sucking out all the oxygen in the room, everybody dying. We got that. But Danielle, she didn't even know this. She has a random mutation where she can hold her breath for 20 minutes. So while everybody else dies, you're gonna live. Now the question is, again, I don't want to get too personal, but do you happen to have any kids or? No kids. Maybe she might be interested in having some kids. Maybe at some point. So let's think about, like, from an evolutionary perspective, if we want this trait, ability to hold your breath, to spread, how's that going to happen? Well, Danielle has to go on some dates, meet someone that she's into.
We don't need a doctor to tell us what has to happen.
Right. You get the idea.
We get the idea.
Then maybe that special miracle of birth will happen with a kid. And maybe if she has enough children, maybe half of them might share this trait. And in that way, their children's children, and this will go on. And,
Yeah, so that's human evolution. We got to wait a while,
right.
but that's just human.
That's
just evolution.
yes, that's human evolution. That's evolution, but it's a specific type of evolution, really. It's called vertical gene transfer.
Vertical,
Like
down
her
the
genes
generation.
pass down to the children and grandchildren. They go down the generational tree. So while Danielle has to have sex, bacteria have a sex pilus.
Oh dear God.
It's a different thing. This doesn't look like Danielle at all, actually.
No.
But it turns
Or like
out
a date. That
Yeah, no, it's-
recognizably.
I don't know if they're having fun or
It
this
does
is a
feel like something
nightmare.
is coming from and messing that one up.
Exactly. And you're right. About 1 billion years ago, bacteria evolved this crazy trick where they're able to just generate a tube out of their bodies, shoot out of their bodies, and just suck into the person next to them, the bacteria next to them. It doesn't even have to be the same species. They can just create a tube and connect to the person next to
And
them.
they're shooting genes, I assume. Like
So
that's
they
where
make this tube, and then they can make a copy of some of their genes and just send them over to the person next to them.
wow.
So
That's pretty cool.
that's the sex pilus. And so I kind of want to use this now as an example. Okay, so we're going to try the same scenario again. Instead of you guys being humans, now you're all bacteria. Okay, you all have a sex pilus. So I need to pick someone in the audience. I'm going to pick you with the white shirt. All right, okay. So what's your name? Rich. Not a typical bacteria name, but we'll go with it. Rich, the bacteria, you have a special mutation. Let me explain. All right, so you're all bacteria. Here's what we're going to do. In this scenario, all you need to live is light, okay? That's what you need is bacteria. So let's go ahead and turn all the house lights down. And as these are turning down, you guys are all slowly dying.
This is getting weird. Yeah.
But Rich the bacteria has a special mutation. He didn't even know he had it. He has the ability to make his own light. So Rich, please tell me that you have a little glow stick. Only Rich, the special bacteria, you can go ahead and turn on that glow stick for us. And hold it up. So
Yeah,
we
kind of
can-
wave it around. Let's see it.
All right. So using the sex, right? This is serious. Like no one's ever been to a rave, I guess. All right. So, Rich, anyone you tap on the shoulder can then turn on their glow stick. Don't do it yet. Don't do it yet.
hold
We're
on,
gonna time this. Okay. And then once you get tapped, you can turn on your glow stick and you can tap people around you.
Yeah, when you get tapped, also spread the tap. Yeah.
And let's see how long it takes for this trait to spread everywhere, okay? On my count. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay.
Hold him
Picking
up
up
so
the-
we can see him. Let's see this happen. Don't turn on your glow stick till you get tapped.
It's what's there was like it didn't
Oh, this is so
off the it didn't hit right away, but once it gets going, and this is a little
Yes.
creepy. Can you guys see it up there on the screen too? Don't be afraid to cross the aisle. That is something that we do like to do on public radio. We try to cross the aisle, like
Look at this.
We're going to be all inclusive. We want no
These guys are still dying over here.
No
They're
list-
struggling.
no listener left behind, please.
What's this? The VIP section is all dying over here.
I didn't realize to this moment how much it was going to feel
This
like a
is
bunch
so
of
cool.
glowing, waving sex pilises. As
How about back there? How are we doing? They're all alive.
yeah,
Look at this.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right, nice. Let's bring the house lights up. Give yourselves a round of applause. That was actually really cool.
That was amazing. That was great.
That was really
that
cool.
was really amazing to watch.
You
It
guys
was
are
actually,
great
like-
bacteria. That was so good.
Everybody, give yourself a round of applause.
Yes. Give yourselves a round of applause. So, what you just witnessed is actually horizontal gene transfer, right? So while humans have to pass genes down, you guys can pass genes horizontally. You could just pass them to each other.
Meanwhile, I think Danielle is still like trying to find that date, and we could like.
Right. She's not so sure about the last date she went on. There's gonna be some time.
I mean, I want
right?
you to take your time, but
Right, exactly. So, you got to think about that. Look at how fast that spread. And now you take into account that for every single human being on Earth, there are 30 trillion bacteria, okay?
Per person.
Per person.
so that's me 30 trillion, you 30 trillion, 30 trillion, 30 trillion.
Exactly. This is just unbelievable. There's universes of bacteria for every single human being, and all it takes is for like one mutation to happen in one of those bacteria, and then that trait is going to spread like wildfire.
So what we're up against is like terrifying numbers of blazingly fast and nimble, tiny little enemies.
Exactly. It really is like our brains versus their sex pillus. And their sex pillus is winning, basically.
Well, but this is actually where I was hoping that our brains might come back in, because sex pills and trait tricks, and we do a drug, they figure out a way around it, but then we come up with a new drug.
Well,
right?
That's the idea. Problem is, like, we haven't really been coming up with new antibiotics. We sort of fell off a cliff. Like, we haven't come up with a new antibiotic, a significant one, since like 1980.
Oh,
We just don't anymore.
That really does just. Where were you born? When were you born?
I was born in 1980.
So, like, since the moment when your parents decided you should become a doctor, there's been one antibiotic.
Yeah.
And
They
since the moment you
screwed me.
became a doctor, there's been none.
Right. That's why I should have
but
gone into
what-
science. I should have gone a PhD, and then I would have invented another one. But no one's inventing antibiotics anymore.
Other than you becoming but why? Why is there not? There's 0 new antibiotics since 19 whatever that is.
Yeah.
Why?
It's mostly like an economic issue. You think about how much money it costs to do all these trials to invent a drug. That's going to cost you like $1 billion. So that's a lot if we all have to chip in on that, And you're going to do all this to make a drug. It might work, and if it does, bacteria, just in a matter of like 2-3 years, they're going to figure out a way around it. So it's just kind of like a money-losing proposition for pharmaceutical companies. So they're just not going to do it.
So that means that you then are literally just sitting around using the same drugs from the 1990s and before, the same drugs over and over again. Meanwhile, every time you use one, the bacteria has a chance to train up on it and figure a way around it.
Yeah, and that's how like a little trickle of bacterial resistance that's always been around, it's like turning into an avalanche. It's scary. I talked to the WHO. There's a whole chapter of the WHO dedicated to this, and they told me that currently, as of today, 1 in 6 infections is resistant to the antibiotic that used to work for it. Like, you have to use something else. And currently today, 1 million people a year are dying from infections that they used to survive like a couple years ago. And obviously that number's about to get a lot bigger too.
Do you remember when you were pitching me this story and I said, well, you can't just leave these people depressed and destitute?
No, I know.
And you remember I said, like, there's somewhere there's going to have to be a ray of hope, and I'm thinking now-ish?
Yeah, no, I know.
It's not a bad
No, I
time
don't want to
for,
bum
like-
people out. Today's like the warmest day of the year. I don't want to.
That's not helping.
I had this. Okay. Let's see. I have a section. Well, I did have this like 5-minute lecture on untreatable gonorrhea. I thought that might be interesting. I don't know, but maybe not. Okay, all right. We'll skip that one. What about the resurgence of typhoid disease in Pakistan that no one knows how to treat? No? Okay.
No.
All right, we'll skip that. But
Yeah.
well, this is anthrax. Unfortunately, we do have to talk about drug-resistant anthrax. Just give me a minute here.
Okay. All
No,
right.
no, this is going to be good because I promise you, there's a key to the mystery in
You
in
have
this
special
anthrax.
dispensation for a couple minutes.
Okay, all right. Just follow me here, okay? So we're going to tell a story about a guy, Lance Price. He's a scientist. He's like the man when it comes to antibiotic resistance, studying all this stuff. But at the time of this story, it's like the 90s. He's a master's student, and he was kind of assigned to do a research project that was, at the very least, bizarre, I would say.
Well, this is an embarrassing story. So my job was to try to characterize how Bacillus anthracis, the organism that causes anthrax, how it would become resistant to Cipro. Like, what are the mutations that would allow it to become resistant to Cipro so that they could detect that if there was a bioterrorist event?
But I assume Cipro is an antibiotic.
Yeah, Cipro's an antibiotic. It's like probably people have taken here for a UTI. We give it out all the time, but weirdly enough, it also works for anthrax.
Okay. And what is
The more you know,
what is Lance trying to figure out? Like, what exactly is it that he's doing?
Right. So Lance is like doing this experiment where he basically puts anthrax on a petri dish and sprinkles some Cipro on it, but like not enough to kill all the anthrax, but just to kill most of it. And then he allows the anthrax that survived to kind of do, the thing you guys just did, spread some ideas, repopulate, and then he sprinkles some more Cipro onto it. Most of them die, but then the ones that live, they spread some information, and he just keeps doing this over and over again.
Basically, I was training this organism. It was like sparring with it to get it some skills, and then it eventually builds up those skills to where it's a champion.
So now he's got super anthrax in his dish in his lab. Okay, great.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
This would be illegal today, by the way. This was before the letters were mailed.
So it should have been illegal
Yeah,
then.
you're just
I would never
growing
repeat this.
anthrax for fun.
Right.
Yeah.
But not for fun, but with
For
a
science.
specific purpose. But
But I'm on Lance's side because actually the key is like sort of in this experiment, because basically what that's showing is, at least from a bacterial point of view, like what doesn't kill you legitimately makes you stronger. And so that's why as doctors we're always thinking like, we want to treat things only if there's really an infection and then really kill everything. Like, we don't want there to be like any survivors that can live to tell the tale of what happened.
So this is why, like, when I get an infection and my doctor's like, even if you start feeling better, finish the bottle.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And hospitals, we're obsessed with this. Like, we do this to the nines. Like, we have like committees that are filled with annoying people that will email me if I do something wrong, or they pull me into a Zoom meeting, or there's like all these like protocols we got to follow. I get it. It's annoying, but we're very anal about this in the hospital. But Lance is doing this experiment, and he doesn't automatically start thinking about doctors and hospitals. He actually starts thinking about like farms, agriculture, ranches.
I'd spent so much time on, in agriculture as a kid in Central Texas, and I'd spent, almost every summer working on the ranch.
Yeah. So he's on the ranch, and he basically realizes, and I didn't even realize this, it turns out, antibiotics, they don't just go to humans. Like, we also give them to animals. I don't know why that never occurred to me. But if I had to ask you, like, of all the antibiotics given in the US, what percentage would you say go to humans versus animals?
I don't know. It's like I feel like it's one of those things where I'm supposed to guess bigger than I would think, but I have no idea. Half. I don't know.
Oh, it's reasonable, but actually 70% of all the antibiotics given are given to animals, not humans. So like every year we eat and take 7 million pounds of antibiotics. Farm animals are getting 20 million pounds every year.
Well, that's not like, I mean, that's 70% is one thing, but like that's 3 times. So like we are giving, the cows and pigs and chickens are getting 3 times the antibiotics that we humans are getting.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Wow.
And I think that's when this connection took place, right? So something in the back of my head, from the ranch days and just doing this evolutionary study, I just was thinking, wow, we could be doing this in a very large scale in our animal production.
Because that's the thing. It's like we're not just doing it like in a good way. They do it in a very irresponsible way. Let me put it that way. Like they're basically just mixing their food with antibiotics. They mix the water, their drinking water, with antibiotics. They like spray it on the ground. They inject them with antibiotics. It's just
this is not like just if they get sick.
No. This isn't just if they get sick. This is like there's no regulation around this at all. They just use it. It's just very willy-nilly. Like have some antibiotics.
Wow.
Yeah. So, like, the question is, right, like, all right, are these, like, the same antibiotics that we use,
Yeah.
Or are these different antibiotics? And in many cases, these are the same antibiotics that we use, treating, like, the same infections that we get.
Well, but so they're using the same antibiotics on the farm, and they're doing it in this willy-nilly way, which Lance has shown us is, like, just going to super train the bacteria.
Right.
So you end up with, like, some super bacteria from the farm. Can that get off the farm and into me?
Well, that's the question, exactly. So, like, what happens to that bacteria? Does it just mess up the animals? Does it mess us up? And that's what Lance wanted to figure out. So he designs a study, and like all good studies, it involves poop. It's like a common theme in Radiolab, I feel like. Right?
Yes, it comes up a lot.
So he designs this study. All right, so what he does, he decides to study the poop of chicken catchers. I don't know if have anyone heard of chicken catchers? Has anyone been a chicken catcher? We did a show in Arkansas and we talked about chicken catchers, and like 2 people in the audience were like, "I was a chicken catcher." Like,
Yeah.
and the sound guy is like, "Me too," but not New York City, I guess. But basically, what a chicken catcher is the person who goes around the chicken farm and picks up the chickens by their necks with their hands and throws them in the chicken truck when they're like ready to get harvested, basically. So they're touching a lot of chickens. So what he does is he measures the bacteria in the poop of these chicken catchers versus the bacteria in the poop of like regular people like, you know, you and I.
Right.
So we cultured all this poo, and then we analyzed the data, right? So and the one thing that popped out like really strong was gentamicin resistance, and so it turned out that the chicken catchers had 32 times the risk for carrying gentamicin-resistant E. coli as their peers.
So, you know, when you think about gentamicin resistance, what's going on? So basically, these chickens, before they even hatch, they would poke a hole in the egg and inject that egg with gentamicin. And that's like pretty standard. Then the chickens would grow up, they're being fed gentamicin like left, right, center. And so the E. coli that live in the gentamicin were eventually learning from this, becoming resistant to the gentamicin. Those bacteria were jumping from the chickens onto the hands of the chicken catchers, into the mouths of the chicken catchers, enough to the degree where they're literally shitting out resistant bacteria. So,
And
yeah.
look, if you're an epidemiologist and you get 3 times the difference, you're doing cartwheels down the hall, right? So you're like, I found something, look at this, it's miraculous. But this was 32 times, and I just said, we've got to be doing something wrong, right? So we looked at the numbers over and over, and it was clean.
I guess, did we fact check that? Like 32 times. So the person handling a chicken is 32 times more likely to have a resistant form of E. coli in their bodies than someone who's not handling a chicken.
Yeah, exactly. And then they find out that, okay, these chicken catchers are going home, that resistant bacteria is getting into their children. Then they find that those bacteria are spreading through the schools of the children. They later find out that if you're driving behind that chicken truck carrying chickens, those bacteria are getting off of the truck in through your air vents and landing in the cars behind them, onto the people behind it. It's like, it's truly insane. And then when you really just sit back and think about it, like, then these chickens die, they get packaged up with the bacteria in them, and they get sent to like all of our houses, really.
Do you remember when like 10 minutes ago I was like, can we do the turn to hope thing?
No, I know. I'm sorry. I'm going through a lot of stuff.
And then you did anthrax, and then you did this.
Right. No, I know. But like, look, to me, this is exciting. This is good because like I'm spending my whole life in the ER, like trying to be super anal, like, no, you're not getting into azithromycin, like, I'm not giving you a Z-Pack, but really, like, this is where the real battle is happening. I've been on the wrong battlefront the whole time.
Well, but so then what, okay, what's your next move? Like, you gonna call up Big Chicken?
Well, I did the Radiolab thing. Yes, that's actually exactly what I started emailing people. I was trying to do the Radiolab thing. So I emailed Tyson Chicken, and they weren't into me actually
This has got
at
some
all.
real Epstein Files vibes
Yeah,
going
no,
on
this-
here. Like, I mean, I appreciate that you
I was
that
not
like
on
the
the
person
island.
that wrote to you, but you also took out your own name, the two. Like you don't want to be anywhere on this, I guess.
Now is not a time to have my name on anything that looks like that. But yes, this is Tyson, and they're like, listen, bro, like,
Nah.
yeah, fuck off. You know what I mean? They did not care. I'm just going to side note, they accidentally sent me their press response of things to say to reporters who ask.
Oh, really?
And it was like, don't respond, check their social media, like discredit. So anyway, that didn't work out. But I kept looking. Eventually, I was able to find one guy who is a higher up at a chicken company, big deal guy, and he was actually thinking about a lot of these same issues that we're talking about.
Okay.
And he actually agreed to talk to me.
Great.
So let's bring him up. This is Bruce Stewart-Brown. He's the Chief Medical Officer at Perdue Chicken.
Oh, okay. Bruce, you got there. Do you have a mic? Oh, there you go.
Hey,
Bruce,
nice to see everybody.
thank you for coming.
Thank you.
You for agreeing to talk about this.
Absolutely.
You want to start us off? You want to
Yeah,
kick us
so,
off? With
okay,
like-
so Bruce, thank you for talking to me. You actually let me come down to the chicken farm. I got to explore it. It was intense, but kind of cool. And I guess I kind of learned about how antibiotics have just been a part of raising chickens since like day one, and it's just part of the culture. But then you get called into the office by your boss, Jim Perdue, and he wants to tell you something. Maybe we could start there.
Yeah, so I'm a veterinarian, and I started at Perdue in 1998 as a field veterinarian, and just kind of getting used to how commercial chicken was raised and the process of being a veterinarian specifically for chickens. And one of the things that's the culture of Perdue is to kind of see and hear and listen to consumer concerns. So we have like an 800 number. You can fax, Facebook. In those days, you could fax. You could write a letter. You could call. Any way that
you like have like a comment section. Like I feel like it's, you know, like people can. All right.
Yeah, all kinds of ways to kind of express what you're worried about as it relates to. We're an old company, 100 years. You don't get there without kind of thinking about the consumer and what they're worried about. So, and every month we would have a meeting with the whole company, and Jim Perdue's a third generation CEO chairman of the company at the time, and he would be on the call, and we would run through concerns that people have, and we had a process that said if we get a certain number, it's going to hit the radar, and we're going to talk about it.
A certain number of comments about something.
Certain number of comments about the concerns, and in 2002. We got in a room together and talked about the fact that concerns around antibiotic use had hit the radar for us. And that means that people were calling in or writing and saying, look, I heard you guys use a lot of antibiotics in chickens. They weren't asking about gentamicin, they weren't asking about a specific drug. What they were concerned about, they had heard that we use antibiotics and a lot of them, and they wondered why. And they also made the comment that if anybody in the chicken world could figure out how to do that a different way, surely it was you guys. And in this meeting then, and this is 2002, Jim is going, look, I want you guys, Bruce, I want you to kind of focus on the fact that, first of all, tell me why we use all those antibiotics, and then second, tell me how we can not use all those antibiotics. Let's make it a project, and start now, and tell me what I need to do. Tell me how I need to help you. Go anywhere in the company you need to go. If it's over to the feed department, if it's over to the hatchery, if it's to the breeders, work wherever you need to work, but lay out a plan so that we can see if we can work our way out of this.
Well, let me ask you, at that moment in time when the big cheese has showed up and said we're going to do this, what's your reaction? Are you like, all right, that's great, or you were like, oh Jesus?
I'm going,
great. I don't, or do you even know how?
Yeah. I'm going, oh man, we have got to change everything, and he's going, okay, let's do that.
And I assume in a situation like, I mean, this is the family-run business when Jim Perdue says do something.
Yeah, I mean, he has a pretty long view. He's a scientist, and he's got a PhD too. And he understands kind of this microbiology thing. And there are specific things that he goes, look, this is not going to go the other way. It's not going to go away. And I understand that we got a lot of work to do, but I want you to work on it. I want you to stay after it, and I'm going to come sit down with you. And they did this. He came every year to my office and goes, how's that going? And what's going on? Did we make any progress this year?
I'm sure you love those meetings.
Well,
but the cool thing was at the end of the meeting, he goes, how can I help you? Is there somebody blocking? Is there some group that's not weighing in? Because I want to talk to them.
Well, so let's get into what did you do exactly? What was the first thing that you had to do to try to get these antibiotics out of chickens?
So there's four 4 ways a chicken company in those days, this is, 2002, 4 ways that chicken companies were using antibiotics, including us. One is it was going in every egg as Avir
Like
was
injected into the egg?
injected into the egg with a vaccine to keep the vaccine clean as you vaccinate. You have this tremendous opportunity in a chicken to vaccinate the embryo. It's amazing, honestly, that you can get the vaccine started, in an embryo. But you do poke a hole in the egg. And the egg did come out of the rear end of a hen, which is the same place, manure comes out of. So it can be dirty, and the idea was keep it clean with the antibiotic. Okay, that's
So
the first.
cleaning chicken cloaca is step number 1.
Yeah, no, well, you're worried about it, and one of the things is that you want to make sure the egg is clean, and we had to work on that. But the other parts were there was antibiotics in the feed. Every bite of feed from day old to when they were processed had an antibiotic in it in those days. An antibiotic considered for growth promotion or disease prevention, even though they weren't sick, just in case they might be, and it helps their gut stay healthy through all the challenges. So we were putting antibiotics in the feed for that.
So what would happen if you were to remove that antibiotic from the feed?
Well, we knew it was helping. We knew that their digestive tract could get messed up, especially on some farms, especially in some houses. And we weren't really quite sure which farm or which house. So honestly, it's a little bit lazy, but we putting it on all, not just us, the whole industry was putting it in all the feed. And there's another for an anticoccidial. And then the fourth.
Wait, but if you were like, now I have to take the antibiotics out of the feed,
Yeah.
what's going to happen? Are you going to end up with sick chickens, or is it you're like, oh, we took it out and it was fine?
Yeah, you're going to get sporadically more birds you have to treat. And so whatever your treatment rate was, at least we thought, if we don't do something different and we pull the if you just pulled out the antibiotics, you are likely going to have to treat quite a few chickens, and that's not right. That's not a great thing. So the idea was and the other idea is, look, if chicken flocks are going to get sick, we're going to treat them. It's the right thing to do. You just got to figure out ways for them not. It's all about prevention. And in our case, prevention in ways other than antibiotic in every bite of feed in every
so what do you end up doing to make up if you're going to take the antibiotics out?
So
what do you have to do to make up for that?
First thing is you have to redefine clean. You have to decide, in our case, that we thought this egg was clean, it's got to be cleaner. It cannot be laid on the floor. A hen, if this was a hen house and a hen had its choice where it would lay an egg, it wouldn't be on this stage. It'd be in that back corner where it's dark, and it would be on the floor. It wouldn't be in the chair. And what we wanted was the hen to lay an egg in her nest. And what you had to do was make sure that light bulb that was making that corner, the light bulb's out. How about we put the light bulb, replace the light bulb. Make sure that there's not dark areas in the chicken house, and that the hens are not laying their eggs on the floor. They're laying them in a clean nest, so then we don't have to use antibiotics in the shot at the hatchery.
And then when I went down to the farm, I'm seeing that the things they used to feed these birds were other animal parts. And so that gives them gastrointestinal illnesses because it's like, kind of gross food. And so then they got to use the antibiotics. So then they decide to change the feed to.
Yeah, we had to look at the feed a whole new way, take the antibiotics out, take the animal byproducts out because those are irritants, put in probiotics, good bacteria, things that help the digestive tract of a chicken operate optimally. Same thing, you're probably all familiar with the good bug thing. It's really big in chickens.
Dude, you're literally switching from putting something that kills bacteria in their food to something putting that encourages the growth of bacteria.
Yeah, really
That's
encouraging.
amazing. And is this all is it you're going along. Is it working? Does it seem like you're getting somewhere? How long is this taking you? Or I don't know, maybe there's some other things you had to do too, but.
Yeah, well, we did have to work on the chicken house. But I'd say this, that the change in feed, the change in approach to feed was a big deal. The cleaner eggs was a big deal. But changing the way you care for chickens became the thing. So raise these chickens in a way that even if nobody cared you used antibiotics, you wouldn't use them. So no antibiotics needed was the way better way to look at it. Raise them in such a way, the whole thing became about caring for chickens in a way that you'd never, let a chicken be a chicken. Put things in the chicken house so they can get up off the floor. Let them exercise. Put some windows in the chicken houses, back in the chicken house, because almost the traditional industrial chicken house has 0 windows. And it's all artificial light. Put some windows back in. Expand the floor space to something above the floor. Chickens like to do 3 things. They like to climb, they like to perch, and they like to hide. And in a traditional chicken house, they don't get to do much of any of that. And so get that back in there. Take the stressors away from the way you raise chickens as much as you can, and learn all the time. Learn new things every year. Work on more of the stuff associated with chicken gets to be a chicken. Make a chicken's house. Make a chicken house, not a barn.
A chicken home.
A chicken home.
I mean, it does sort of like, I mean, we're talking clean, good diet, get outside and exercise, get good sleep. I feel like this is not far off from like, what you learn as a parent that you need to do to keep your kid healthy. Like it feels like sort of basic Doctor 101.
Right.
On like.
So much about it is lifestyle and
chicken lifestyle.
Yeah, chicken lifestyle and working, paying attention to what chickens tell you, about what's good for them. And I mean, we did this work with herbs. We started to use quite a bit of herbs in the feed as well, oregano and those kinds of things. And we did a study where we grew 10 different herbs, put them in front of chickens, let them go, and tried to figure out which ones they went to the fastest, and which ones they tore up, and which ones they left alone. So kind of this chicken's choice. And we put some of it in the feed, and when we did the outdoor access part, which we have a lot of birds going outside now, we put it in the pasture, thinking, okay, well, they can get it in the feed, but they can also kind of go outside and graze it in addition to anything else. So
can I get you to over how long did this take, and maybe where did you land? Where are we at now?
2002 we started. All the growth promotion, disease prevention stuff was out about 2007. We were working on hatcheries the whole time. We had 12 of them. We learned something in every hatchery. It did not necessarily translate from one hatchery to the other about how to pull the antibiotic and not have a problem. And we got done with that in about 2014. So that took a while. And honestly, chicken companies don't often have long-term projects like this that take this long. But the fact that we're family-owned and interested in things that consumers are concerned about gave us this opportunity to work on. 2016, we were done.
Wait, done means what?
All the antibiotics were out of the feed, out of the eggs, not using any antibiotics for anything other than treating sick flocks.
And that's true Perdue chicken across the board.
It is. And
wow. Yeah.
And that's what that label says, that's no antibiotics ever. And honestly, it's just, that chicken in the label has never seen an antibiotic. Now, we do treat sick chicken flocks, which is, people are concerned about this. Now, it's less than 1% of the houses we have. It used to be 5% when we were using all the antibiotics in 2002. Our percent treated house was in the 5% range. Now it's less than 1% without all the antibiotics in this case. So we've made a lot of progress on knowing how to raise chickens, knowing how to work through the thing, changing the feed, still working on the feed. Anxious to put in some phytonutrient kind of things, the stuff that you hear about, superfoods, berries and grapes, and I can guarantee you that's going to show up in our feed as time goes on, because there's real value in these phytonutrients as well. So yeah, 2016 only treated flocks, and those don't go in the label.
Well, first of all, congratulations. Secondly, thank you for the chicken, and thank you for coming up here and talking to us. And everything. All right, everybody.
Got to make the chicken house into a chicken home.
Yes. It is actually imagining the chicken leaving its well-lit coop to go out to its little sort of playground exercise area with maybe a probiotic parfait in hand.
Yeah.
It's delightful, other than the fact that we are eventually going to slaughter and eat them. And
Right.
And I gotta say, also to take in consideration just what the animal industry is doing. Should we be doing it? The climate,
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's a lot of problems with eating meat in general. You could think about climate change, you could think about ethics, and this doesn't solve all of that, but certainly in just a proof of concept, To me, it's interesting, like the antibiotics were sort of masking cruel treatment towards these animals. Like you can treat them however you want, but if you pump them with enough antibiotics, they live. And once you remove those antibiotics, all of a sudden you're sort of seeing the truth of what you're doing. And if you treat them better, they're healthier, you're healthier. What we do to them comes back to us. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting proof of concept. I'm into it.
Yeah, I guess I'm just back thinking about the war, because let's say that everybody went full Bruce, and there's maybe a cow Bruce and a pig Bruce, but even then,
Turkey Bruce.
Given the way you've described what's going on globally, I mean, is even that any kind of decisive move on our part, or
Right.
are we?
Well, to go back to sort of the war metaphor, the way I see it, everything that Bruce is doing, that's sort of playing great defense, right?
Yeah.
Let's stop training these guys to get better. But I agree, at some point we have to go on offense, like
Yes.
any good war. And so I do have one more story I want to share with you guys that kind of takes us there. And honestly, I think this is the part that gives me really the most hope, the most excitement.
All right, good.
But to get there, we're going to have to go back to a dark place. It's been the theme of the night. But we got to go back to Steffanie Strathdee.
This is who went with her husband Tom, and the Tom gets sick, and okay.
Exactly. Let's go back to Steffanie and her husband Tom. And at this point, Tom is in shock. He's very sick. He's on life support. Let's listen.
So one day the doctors came to me and said, Steph, you realize that Tom's on life support, right? He's on a ventilator to keep his lungs working. He's on 3 medications called pressors to keep his heart working. And now his kidneys are blinking on and off. So that's the trifecta where we stop talking about organs that are having problems working. We're talking about whole systems, whole body systems. I'm going, okay, speak to me. And they said, well, do you want to start kidney dialysis? And so what they were really asking me is, do I want to pull the plug? And that moment was just like, I can't believe this is happening. When you have your advanced directives and you sit down with your partner and you write a will, and he had said to me, hey, if I'm ever brain dead, please pull the plug. But this situation, it was his brain that was alive, it was his body that was dying, and I had no idea what he would want me to do. So the doctors are looking at me and they're saying, okay, what do you want to do? And I said, okay, I think we should ask Tom what he wants to do. And then they said, well, he's in a coma, Steph. How is he going to communicate? I said, well, let's see. Let's just see. So I had this conversation with Tom that you just never think that you're going to have with somebody. And I said, hey, honey, I know you're fighting really hard and you have to be really tired. But I need to know if you want to live. And if you want to live, I need you to tell me by squeezing my hand, and I will leave no stone unturned. And I remember that moment like it was just yesterday. I still get chills just talking about it. I waited for a whole minute, and I thought, oh my God, he's not going to squeeze my hand. And then all of a sudden he squeezed really hard. And I thought, oh yeah, like, you know, I pumped my little blue gloved fist in the air. And then I thought, oh crap, like, what am I going to do now? I'm not a doctor.
I mean, the question in the room here, for me at least, is what did she do next?
Yeah, well, we can ask her. Steffanie, come on up.
Why don't you go here? Avir, come on.
Hey, everybody. I can't believe I'm on Radiolab.
No.
I'm geeking out.
I was having... If you had a chance to read Stephanie's book, you'd be geeking out about her being here with us. Thank you for coming. I'm going to just go in with the first one, the big question that we're all left with, I think. What do you do next?
Well, I was terrified. I mean, some of the top infectious disease physicians are at University of California, San Diego. They were our colleagues caring for Tom. And, but, you know, I was his wife, and I wanted him to live. And I thought, okay, like, if he dies, I want to know that I did my very, very best. So I'm an AIDS researcher by training. And I learned as an AIDS researcher that there are experimental treatments that got studied while we were doing clinical trials. And there should be some experimental treatments that we could use to save Tom. So I hit the research. I went on PubMed, which is a search engine that the National Library of Medicine makes it freely available. And I entered the keywords Acinetobacter baumannii, the superbug that was killing him, alternative treatments. And up popped something called Bacteriophage Therapy, or phage therapy for short.
And what is bacteriophage, or what's a phage? Or
Bacteriophage are viruses that have naturally evolved to attack bacteria. They're the oldest, most populous organism on the planet, and they kill bacteria. And it's almost like you're using nature to kill something that is killing, somebody that you care about. So
So are you saying just like how like I can catch a cold, like a bacteria can catch its own cold type of thing?
Yeah, The Perfect Predator. That's the name of our book. It's like, so
but does that mean that you're going to... Well, okay, keep going.
Well, what was weird is that I learned about bacteriophage when I was a student at the University of Toronto back in 1986. Like it was just mentioned in class, but I never knew that they had ever been used to treat like bacterial infections. But they were discovered before penicillin. It's just that they had been, popularized in the former Soviet Union, and that was seen as kind of Russian medicine and fell out of favor in the West.
Okay, so the idea then is that you're going to put a virus into Tom to fight the bacteria. And is it like, when you're doing the PubMed Googling, it's like, here's the one to you? Like, what are you coming up?
Yeah, well, that was the other problem. Well, first I got my colleagues at the University of California, San Diego said, wow, what an interesting and intriguing idea. If you can find phage that are a match for Tom's bacterial isolate, we'll call the FDA and see if they'll give us permission to give it to him on a compassionate basis because he's going to die. But turns out there's like 10 million, trillion phages on the planet. Like that's more than all the stars in the sky. So that was even more daunting. And luckily, I was able to find researchers that agreed to help with the help of Dr. Chip Schooley, the head of infectious diseases at the time at the University of California, San Diego. We found people, and even the U.S. Navy, who had been sourcing phages from the bilges of ships around the world.
From like the inside of underneath the ship?
Yeah.
Scraping off viruses?
Yeah. But the best place to actually go for phage is where there's a lot of bacteria. And you know where there's a lot of bacteria, Soren?
I feel like this is going back to poop.
It's going back to poop. So it turns out that sewage and barnyard waste and duck pond waste, that kind of stuff, the stuff from like like the farms that
Yeah.
Bruce was talking about, that's a perfect place to source phage. So within a couple of weeks from my first email asking total strangers for help to the day that we treated Tom with these viruses that attack bacteria, it was only 3 weeks. Like, compare
Because
that.
that's 3 weeks of people tromping through the sewers and scraping the bottom of Navy boats and like sending like.
Well, some of these were already samples that were in labs,
Okay.
but literally,
Yeah.
you know. So, you know, I couldn't believe that we were doing this, but, you know, like Tom's in a coma. I said, you don't believe, like, we're going to be like pumping like, you know, like purified shit into you to see if you're going to live. Like, it's just like, I can't believe this is my life. But that's essentially what we did.
And that was did you say 3 weeks later?
3 weeks, that's all it took. Like, compare that to an antibiotic that takes 10 to 15 years to develop and a price tag of $1 billion or more.
Yeah.
But,
So-
you know,
Okay, so you
Well, do you know where the particular phage that matched Tom's bacteria, where did that come from?
well, not me personally, but the researchers that sent these phage, and they were
it was
doing
the
this for
bilge of
total
of the
strangers.
cruise ship in Egypt. That
Yeah.
was like,
Well, it wasn't. It was. These are Navy
okay.
ships. Yeah. So that's what we did. We it was the scariest day of my life, but me and Tom's 2 daughters said, okay, let's do it. He's, you know.
and does it send it in an injection, an IV? It's like,
First, we put them in the catheters in his abdomen because that was the closest to the source of the infection, which was in his gut. And then we injected them, and it was 1 billion phages per dose every 2 hours. And 2 to 3 days later, he was like within hours of dying, I was told. He lifted his head off the pillow, opened his eyes, and kissed his daughter's hand. Carly was on shift at that day, and everybody in the ICU freaked out. There were like people cheering, there were people crying. I was crying too. It was the happiest day of our lives.
wow. How much do you know about like, I mean, the virus goes in and attacks the bacteria, but like, how much do you know about why this is so effective, or what's actually happening in there, or how this is going down? Like, what's actually going on inside the body?
Well, in Tom's case, there was something else that was a bit of an opportunistic kind of situation, because a couple of the phages were synergistic with one of the antibiotics.
What does that mean? How
well,
does it
okay,
virus synergistic with it?
Let me explain this. Okay, so you're a bacteria, okay?
Okay.
And I'm a phage, and Avir is the antibiotic, okay? And we're both trying to kill you,
Okay.
all right? Okay?
Why is this?
Now,
Typical day at the
Now-
office. for Soren.
now you're a bacteria.
So
You
much death and-
you do
okay.
not have a brain in this example, okay? Like, I don't know about regular life.
Just
but-
in this example?
But you have to make a genetic decision about who you would rather face, him or me. And I'm scarier than he is, okay? You
Okay.
do not want to
I
have to
don't.
deal with phage. So you decide to take off your shirt. Now, okay.
This
Now,
story's
Nobody
getting
wants
better.
that.
I know
Like-
that this is not that kind of show,
Look, it's-
people. but your shirt is your slimy biofilm layer. Okay,
Okay.
that's your superpower.
It's his resistance, basically,
Yes,
right?
don't remember
but that's
saying
where the receptor for the phage is on your shirt.
Okay, so if I get rid of my biofilm
take your
shirt
shirt off-
receptor, you can't attach.
That's right, and so
Okay.
I die. But in doing so, you have made yourself susceptible to Avir's the antibiotic.
Because
Okay?
he loves nothing more than a shirtless.
So he kills you. He gets you.
Yeah.
So
So it's like it's a 1-2 punch
That's
kind
right.
of thing.
So
or
there's an
even if one
indirect
starts
effect.
to work, but does that mean that like when you use phage therapy, not only do you have a new way of getting at this bug, you've unresistanced it. Like you've dialed back the resistance that it developed
Yeah.
over the years of whatever, and now a bacteria can actually be newly susceptible to a drug
That's
that it
right.
was?
So, phage therapy is now going through clinical trials all around the world. Phage is all the rage, people. But
She's not going to say this, but actually, she is the one like setting up all these clinics all over the
no,
place. Yeah,
well,
she is.
no.
Yes, she is.
Well,
Yeah.
at the University of California, San Diego, we do have what became the first dedicated phage therapy center called the Center for Innovative Phage Applications and Therapeutics, or IPATH. So we do provide phage therapy to
what I
people
said.
that have no, but there's many around the world now. And of course, I didn't do this all by myself.
I mean, but I hear a lot happening, but I also have to wonder a little bit, like, why, like, I didn't know more about this already, why Avir wasn't already thinking about this as something he might have to use, like, why isn't this already happening everywhere?
Yeah. Well, when COVID came on the scene, everybody, felt it right away, right? It was a pandemic that hit hard, hit fast. With antimicrobial resistance, it's a slow burn. So you don't really know or feel it unless it hits you in your personal life. Like you're an emergency room doctor, or you're his dad, and you're seeing patients that used to be treatable that aren't treatable anymore, or you're me, like whose husband is suddenly dying. And, we have kind of let this creep up on us. But, also with COVID, we had 4 vaccines or 5 vaccines developed within a year, right? And so if we had the political will to move phage therapy forward, we could be doing a lot more than we are. So those trials are getting done now, but the pace is not fast enough to overcome the pace at which resistance is spreading.
There's a podcast somewhere we could use to get the word out. Or something
Wouldn't that
like
be nice?
Can I ask you the sort of like embarrassingly typical question that a Radiolab person might ask?
With your shirt on, yeah.
So in the moment that Tom came back, like, I don't know, talk to me about how that felt. I mean, I feel like there's relief. I heard joy, but is there pride? Like, I don't know. Give me a little bit on that.
Well, I think that Tom deserves a lot of credit in this too, because that man had so much resilience to bounce back. And, he had been in the hospital 9 months. He'd lost 100 pounds. He lost all of his muscle mass. He had to learn how to walk, how to talk, how to do everything all over again. And now he's the face of evidence-based hope.
Yeah.
That's
an amazing thought. Thank you, Steffanie. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, everybody.
So cool. Wow.
All right, Avir. So we've been through a lot together.
Yeah.
Starting
Thanks for
out with
coming
you,
on
just
this
sort of like
journey of trauma with me, guys. I appreciate it.
But I, like starting from a place of sort of like seeing this happen in front of your eyes, dealing with it on a day-to-day basis, turning to try to sort of start and understand it and do the reporter thing, or at least the research thing, and finding all what you found and sharing all that with us. I guess I am a little bit curious, just like where you're at now. Like, are you still in therapy, or?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I still have a shift tomorrow, so I still got to go to work. I still got to see this stuff, so it's still there. But I guess, I don't know. I mean, thinking about all this stuff makes me think about the whole thing a little bit differently.
How so?
I mean, okay, let's think about it. Like when I was first thinking about it, I'm thinking it's humans versus bacteria, and I'm at the middle of this. It's all about me and like that kind of thing. And as I'm thinking about it more, it's like, it's not really. It's humans, bacteria, there's animals probably playing a bigger role than humans. And then if you think about it some more, it's like, wow, all our antibiotics, our whole weaponry comes from fungi because they've been battling bacteria for longer than we've even been around. And now I'm listening to Steffanie, it's like, oh, there's this whole class of viruses that's been fighting bacteria for longer than the fungi have been around. So I don't know, I guess I'm just looking at the shape of this a little bit differently. It's like, there's a lot of players here, and if anything, we're just like the newest kid on the block.
It does, but it does also then feel so much more, it feels like maybe overwhelmingly complex.
Yes, it is, but I don't know, I guess in a weird way, like I'm realizing we're so young as a species, there's so much we don't know. There's so much left to learn, and I don't know, I just think there's hope in that.
Yeah, I can see that.
Well, I guess before we go, just wanted to play one more quote because I feel like the show can't end without hearing this. I did talk to Tom, and I just wanted you guys to hear him. I asked him if he remembered by any chance that moment where Steffanie squeezed his hand and asked him if he wanted, or Steffanie asked him if he wanted to live.
And he's in a coma, and
Right, at this time he's in a coma. He's completely out of it. He's on the verge of death. And Steffanie asks him, do you want to live?
At that moment, I thought I was a snake in a canyon, curled up under a bush, and there is a wooden platform that visitors could come and view me from. And they would look down and I would look up, and I could see people through this haze of my milky eyes. It would be hot sometimes it was cold. When the night came, I was really alone, disintegrating molecule by molecule, just kind of sinking down bit by bit. My vision, because it was blurred by the milkiness over my eyes, I couldn't see her, but I could hear her in the distance. She said, I know you've been through a lot, and I know that it's hard, and if you want to let go, it's okay, you can go. There was kind of a pause that I had, and I realized I was a snake. I tried to figure out how to squeeze her hand because I was desperate to squeeze her hand, but I didn't know how without hands. So I thought, and then I thought, well, I'm a snake. I can wrap my body around her hand and squeeze. So that's what I did.
Thank you, Avir.
Thank you, guys.
All right, folks. So, can we get Bruce and Steffanie back up here, and we can do a little bit of Q&A? We've got about 10 minutes or so. I don't know. I think there's probably going to be an audience mic going around. How is this going to work, folks? Do we have an audience mic that sort of like travels around? You guys, come on. Avir, please come sit. The three of you. I'll worry about wrangling questions, and the three of you can take these seats. All right. I'm looking for some. I see a raised hand over there. What do we? Oh, do we have a traveling mic? Yes. We do. Okay. Let's go here first. I've got my eye. I'll keep my eye over there. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you so much for such a wonderful show. This is a question for Bruce. I guess I'm just curious about the state of the industry and like other food, like large meat industry. Are other people following in the footsteps of Perdue?
Yeah, I would say I'll speak mostly to the chicken industry. It's the one I know the best. I would say there's very few, if any, eggs injected anymore. So I think that's been taken care of and taken off the table. Quite a bit of focus on the type of antibiotic that you use and trying to stay away from first-tier drugs. Growth promotion is no longer an approved method for, it would be inappropriate or against the law to have a claim on growth promotion, but disease prevention is still a thing, and feed medication is still quite prevalent even in the chicken industry but the selection of drugs that are used and the kind of hatchery piece has been, and here's what I would say about an approach to antibiotics in chickens. I don't think it would be right to pull all the drugs from every chicken company, because I don't think that'll be fair to the chicken. I think what you have to do is decide you're going to change the way you raise chickens. and let the antibiotic piece come along with it. And that's the hard part for a lot of chicken companies to get their arms around is a willingness and a kind of support to go ahead and make all those changes you got to make.
What do we got next? I know I had one over there, so eventually I want to go. Do we have a mic on the other side of the room too, so we can? Okay, so why don't you head there, and in the meantime, I'll come up to the front here. But if I can get you headed over to the far side over there. All right, thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
I just had a follow-up to Bruce, an ugly question about the cost. Is it saving you money now that you've gotten here compared to what you used to have to spend with antibiotics in the mix?
Yeah, there is a cost to it. What we tried to do was, yes, we're going to save some money by taking some things out of the feed, but we put as much into it in some other products usually. The cost, though, can't come at the expense of livability, and it can't come at the expense of feed conversion. Those are two. So what it does come into is it comes into costs associated with the house itself, the farm itself, and the changes that you need to make as it relates to control of the litter and the way you treat litter. And so there are costs. And here's another cost, is you're going to have treated flocks. They don't go into the label. So you have to have segregation at the processing plant, and you have to have products that don't have that label claim. And that's
so if you happen to have to treat a group of chickens because they got sick, then that meat then has to go to a different.
And it has to be segregated from the other meat. So let's say got some treated flocks, we're going to bring them in Friday. Or we're going to bring them the last thing of the day, but there has to be segregation. So it slows, it's a thing to manage around. It's well worth it. If you get it out front, it's one of those things what we talked about all the time is, look, we're going to do this, but we have to do this thing that's inefficient. It has some, things that come along with it, but just do it. Just do it that way.
Can we come over on this side now? You're ready. Go ahead.
My question is actually quite similar on the costs. Perdue was such an interesting case study in making changes to all of these processes, incurring costs, and then it sounds like the treated flocks went from 5% down to 1%. So ultimately, that also sounds like a cost savings. A lot of businesses don't want to change up all of their processes. Can you tell us a little bit more about the costs roller coaster, maybe?
Well, the other part about it that's really key is that we decided to do it over a period of time. And here's the thing. So, all of a sudden we're going to spend some money in a hatchery for a new piece of machinery. And then you go, okay, so wait a second. Why we do that? Let's do this other thing associated with sanitation. It's not for that specifically, but we're going to do it at the same time we're doing these other capital expenditures. So you're spending you minimize the cost because you're thinking about it in conjunction with another thing that you're doing. That takes time, and it takes somebody doesn't get to decide on their own what the cheapest thing to do in the hatchery is. You have to kind of think about it and get it out in front of everybody. But all of a sudden, all the CERs, the capital expenditure reports that are a part of doing a capital expense, have you checked about how it might help us with antibiotic use? Has somebody checked that before we go ahead and do this other thing? That's really hard for a company to kind of put that process in. So we took a certain period of time. That's really hard for companies. We incorporated thoughts into it while we were doing other things that helped minimize, the kind of total capital cost associated with something.
I thought you guys are all being blown up about phages, and we're all on chicken. Do we have a
feel like
phage?
Danielle needs to-
Oh, yes.
Danielle
of course. Of course, absolutely. If you sign up to be treated by you get the right to ask a question for sure.
So this question is for Steffanie, who, full disclosure, I've known her.
She was my first PhD student. Yeah. Dr. Danielle Ompat.
So my question, Steffanie, is you talked about how many phages there are, and then there are all these different bacteria. What is the process of identifying the phage? Is it an individual phage or a cocktail of phages to treat an infection? And is it specific to every person, or can you like come up with a cocktail and then like produce that for lots of patients?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So it's actually very easy to identify phages. You have the sample from the environment, let's say from sewage or barnyard waste, and you put a drop of it on a Petri dish that's streaked with a bacteria that you want to kill. And if you are fortunate, after you incubate that Petri plate for say 24 to 48 hours, if it comes back with like what looks like holes in the Petri dish, where those bacterial colonies have been gobbled up, then you know that those phage exist and that are killing those specific bacteria. And so then you can just add more bacteria to the phage and grow it up in sufficient quantities. Then the hard part becomes the purification process, and using a manufacturing process that has good clinical practice, like treating it like a living antibiotic. But up until that point, it's actually very easy, and high school students and undergraduate students do this in training programs all around the world. But it's just a matter of being able to find the right phage that will kill the bacteria that you're trying to kill. And so what we need are phage libraries. Right now, it's like having 1 million locks scattered around the world and 1 million keys scattered all around the world, and you don't know which key matches which lock. But those phage libraries could be generated and grown, and they do exist. It's just that they're not centralized in any one way that we can use them. So that's what needs to happen, and that's going to take resources.
Oh, my credit reader, I've got to give, yeah. If you read the credits, you also get special. I can just yell. You can, yeah, if you, oh no, you're right behind it. It's right there.
So, the phages sound awesome. Have we noticed any adverse effects or side effects or any negative
Very, very rarely have we seen any negative side effects of phage therapy. Because our bodies are awash in phage. I mean, it's really the phage that are the gatekeepers in our microbiomes. That's what's keeping the bacterial numbers in check in our guts and on our skin, etc. So,
you're saying that along with all the talk we do about the microbiome, that there's a phage
the phageome.
Oh, okay.
It's a thing.
You've already got a word.
It's just that we didn't really know that the phage were there. We didn't know how to measure them or count them and things like that. Everybody's been just thinking about the bacteria, but without the phage, we would be overrun with bacteria. So, at this point, we overdose people with phage when we treat them because we don't know what the right dose is. We have to do dose range finding studies. And we know that there's so few, if any, adverse effects of phage because the body just eliminates the phage that doesn't, find its bacterial host. So, overdosing is not risky. I mean, it's not going to be cost effective over the long run, but we have to do those studies to figure out what kind of dose, what route of administration, all that kind of stuff needs to be determined through studies.
All right, I think we got time for one more.
Got someone way in the back.
Yes, let's go. Let's try the back out. To be fair.
Oh boy. Okay, shout out to the back. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So 2 questions. I think that timeline was kind of striking. Two questions. What sort of timeline do we think we're on to be immune to antibiotics, as it seems like we're on the pathway to? And then secondly, AI has been really interesting and helpful with protein folding issues and solutions. Is there a phage, a way that we can use this technology to figure out these matches of phages as well?
So I think the first part was, when you say timeline, like
Immunity to antibiotics.
immunity.
I can
like,
take that one.
Okay, yeah.
When I talked to the WHO, they said the stat they were confident in is that by 2050 there would be 39 million deaths from infections that we can currently treat. So it's not like, that's a lot of people, but it's not like 7 billion people. So that, I don't know if that's good or bad. I think it's bad, but.
But I don't know if there's anybody out there that has a real timeline for like when do all of our drugs not work, or when even like it's just a little bit too varied to give like a date on like
right.
None of the drugs that we've made now work anymore, and we'll only be able to do well. I guess the phages could strip back the resistance, but like. And then the second question was, have you seen anything AI related in terms of
Absolutely. I mean, AI is already playing a role in terms of how to select phages that would go best in a cocktail, which phage and which antibiotic combinations would be the best to use for the 1-2 punch that we talked about in your shirt taking off session. And also, AI can be used to kind of almost determine, okay, how would we synthesize a phage if we have just the genetic sequence of a bacterium, so that we can almost have like 3D printed phage on demand kind of. So we're not far away from that world. It's coming.
All right, thank you all for your questions. Thank you for coming out tonight. Bruce, Steffanie, once again, I can't thank you enough for spending the time. Avir, good work, buddy. Have a nice night, everyone.